we'll be discussing a critical issue on Nigeria's electoral reform. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has proposed 142 electoral reform proposals to the National Assembly, aiming to improve the electoral process ahead of the 2027 general elections. These proposals include significant changes such as diaspora voting, special voting for essential service providers and election officials, creation of Electoral Offences Commission, and a political party regulatory agency. INEC also seeks to modernize voter identification, promote affirmative action for women and persons with disability, and transfer local government elections to its purview. Joining us today to analyze the recommendations and highlight the existing gaps are Dr. Suleiman Suleiman, the former chairman of Daily Trust Editorial Board, and will explore the implications of these reforms of Nigeria's democracy, the role of civil society, and the expectations of the electorate. You're highly welcome, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So we'll be discussing the potential benefits and challenges of these proposals and what Nigerians can expect from the electoral process in 2027. First off, the question that we would ask is, what do you think about these proposed reforms? Are they in the benefit of the electoral processes or are they not?
Thank you very much for having me, and I think it's an interesting question, an interesting development also. I read about this a few weeks back, and I didn't pay much attention at the time because it was presented like, like news. But now it appears there's action behind it, in the sense that we know that INEC is pushing to have some of this new provisions enforced and brought into our law and so on. I think they're very significant. And the significance lies in at least 2-3 areas. Number one, it demonstrates INEC itself as an evolving institution. One of the most significant things you want in a democracy is for institutions themselves to be learning and to be trying to improve themselves, like you do at home with your children, and so on. It's the same with institutions. It's the same with countries, If there are areas of weaknesses, you look out for them, and propose ways of making them better. So overall, I think this will help to strengthen our electoral process, and directly as well as indirectly, but also our democratic process more broadly. So that's one. Secondly, the process by which these provisions themselves emerge. I read that there was a lot of consultation between INEC and civil society organizations, which I think is important, because it means that people who should have critical voices or who should have a say on these provisions have also had a say in the process. And I think this is good. If we have other institutions like that in the country and are consulting, for example, political parties too, if they're consulting with constituents about how things will be done, so many things that we complain about all the time will be improving gradually. Maybe not at the same time or on a single day, but they will be improving. So that consultative process, I think, it's important. And then third, the manner in which they are doing it. You can see they see 148 provisions, yes. Ideas that they have. I was even wondering, what is it about our elections that require up to 148 amendments, but that only 8 of these require constitutional amendments. So others will probably require maybe slight amendments, changes in the law itself, or even administrative changes within INEC itself. But the constitutional ones are equally important, and it's good that there are not many, because if there are too many, it actually indicates that the problems, we have been trying to run away from have remained with us. So I think the fact that you have them dispersed across some that INEC itself can do, some that the National Assembly can do, and others that you require constitutional changes to be able to do is also important. And overall, if we speak about them individually, take, for example, the idea that INEC should now be conducting local government elections.
Yeah, I was going to get to that, Doctor.
Yeah.
Please.
I'm going to merge it with the other aspect of autonomy. INEC wanting autonomy to appoint,
Yes.
Heads of FCT and other of its head units, thereby giving them autonomy. They want the authority or the power to recommend as compared to what it used to be before. Nigerians, there's a huge trust deficit when it comes to INEC and all their heads and the institution as a whole. Would this make any difference in building that trust and even in the running of INEC in your experience so far? And also touching on this aspect of giving them the power to handle local government elections. Those are one of the issues we saw during the last local government elections we've seen across states, seeing the leading political parties or the states dominate, the state to the ruling party dominating most of the offices. And people were saying, the federal level should handle elections. Would it see any difference and build trust in INEC? What do you make of those two reforms?
Thank you very much. And I like the way you have phrased the questions, because you invoke what Nigerians, that issue of trust deficit is absolutely important, because even if you are trying to do something good, as long as the people that you are doing that thing on behalf don't have trust in what you are doing, you still have a problem. So that trust deficit is there. Otherwise, I think the idea that INEC should be independent enough to be able to appoint its own officials, for me, I think it makes sense. It makes sense in two ways, although, of course, it also has its own
disadvantage.
Yes, and I will come to that. First of all, independence means independence. You can't say, Lillian, you are the CEO of Trust Radio, or what do you call that, your broadcast, or Trust TV, for example, you understand, and you don't have power to appoint reporters who are going to work for you, or to appoint editors who are going to work for you. Somebody else is appointing these editors and so on. And if you have that, that really says something about your own extent of independence, and so on. That's one. Second, the person who is going to appoint is even less neutral than the INEC chairman, because it is going to be, if you say, the current practice is that the president appoints these people, but the president is a politician. Absolutely. First and foremost, and he has political interest, as well. And there's no reason why we should expect him to be more neutral. Certainly that has not been our experience in this country, to expect him to be more neutral than the INEC chairman. Generally, the expectation is that once you become president, you are going to make decisions based on national interest, based on integrity, based on, but these are theories, because even around the world, partisanship influences how these decisions are making. So if a president is going to appoint commissioners, 12 commissioners, including the chairman himself, that's for me, has more issues of trust deficit even than the INEC chairman or the chairman of INEC appointing him. Second, the chairman of INEC is not going to make arbitrary appointments. There will be laid down rules and regulations that they must follow. And these rules are not made for the current chairman of INEC, but yes, the next and the next and the next and the next. For me, I think in a way, it kinds of helps to reinforce the independence of the organization. For example, what if the appointment is thrown open and say, if you have qualifications A, B, C, D, then you can apply. Okay. It means even as Lillian, you feel that, okay, I've done enough of journalism, served my country from the media, let me also apply.
But there's still going to be that trust deficit that the selection process might just be biased.
It depends on how the selection process is done. You know, what my experience in Nigeria is that there are certain small pockets within our institutions where things still, how do I put work according to how they should. I'll give you an example. Personally, in 2019, the ICPC as an organization, they advertised for research fellowships for people to come and do research on anti-corruption policy in the area of law, media, sociology, things like that. And I applied. I was a lecturer at the time, you know, and I didn't know anybody and the chairman of ICPC was the person who led that, who chaired that interview, you know, and we were 6 people, and I was appointed. You know, and I didn't need to know
anyone. So it was based on merit.
Entirely based on merit. And I know that in many, you know, organizations and sectors of the Nigerian society, economy and government, things like that actually happen. You know, so if you have a process like that, you know, it is possible. So I will now think that if you have a robust regulatory framework for how such appointments to be made, and some mechanisms for transparency in them, I should not see any problem there. You might have a chairman that people are not happy with now, for example, but what tomorrow if you have one that you are happy with and somebody still appoints for them? So some of these decisions are not for now necessarily, but for later as well. In my view, I think as long as the framework is robust, you know, and transparent, INEC should be free to, and we should even do that, not just in INEC, but in other areas. For example, why should the president, why should the president be appointing the head of EFCC or ICPC, for example?
Absolutely.
You know, we should find ways of making such appointments open, you know, so that certain things are determined largely by what people can do rather than their political affiliations. Yes.
All right. So speaking on transparency and accountability, there is a particular recommendation where there's supposed to be a creation of an electoral offences commission as well as a political party regulatory agency with our elections marred with inconsistencies and irregularities. Do you think that the creation of these commissions as well as the incessant defection that we're getting in these days, will it put everybody in check and hold people accountable for, you know, the politicians and whoever that is in that process accountable for each and every step of the way?
I doubt it. I can see where the idea is coming from, and it's coming from 2 areas, basically. The first is that INEC has too much responsibilities, some of which has little to do with conducting elections. For example, why should INEC be the one prosecuting electoral offences? Electoral offences are not offences against INEC, they are offences against the Nigerian state. So it's the government itself and the police that should be doing that necessarily. But the way INEC was set up, everything was just thrown at it. Do this, do that, do this, do that. And in the end, it ends up with...
overwhelmed.
And becoming overwhelmed. Thank you, that's the term, you know. So that's one area where it is coming up. But the second area where it's coming up, it's even more significant, which is that why do those offenses recur repeatedly over and over again in the first place? Because if there are not too many electoral offenses, there will be no need to be talking about a separate regulatory agency for prosecuting them in the first place. And that place where that comes from is the political culture in the country. What it takes to be a politician or a voter in Nigeria is clearly different from what it takes to be a politician or voter, even within comparable African countries, frankly. I'll give you an example. Former INEC chairman, Professor Atadi Jega, he said that he went to Kenya and, you know, to oversee their elections processes there. And a day before the election, they went to a primary school where that's supposed to be a polling booth, a voting center, a polling station, they call it, and they noticed that all the voting materials were already there, and that the primary school has only one security person, an old man who sat there with only a stick, nothing, and so on. That tells you something about the political culture in that country.
Yes.
It means that voters, thugs, citizens, delegates, politicians will not go and attack that center to try to steal the ballot papers and the ballot boxes and stuff them and so on. So that's the kind of culture that this regulatory agency is expected to address. I think laws can do it, but I don't think regulatory agencies or laws on their own can do it. You would require a massive approach that really educate Nigerians about what it means to be a politician, what it means to be a voter, and the responsibilities that come with that,
All right, quickly before we go, because it seems we've run out of time. One of the reforms that we've spoken about, but we've not touched on it here is, and I don't know INEC's ability to handle it, is the aspect of early voting and diaspora voting and opportunities for inmate voting. For an electoral body that still struggles with logistics issue, beavers failure, transportation of materials, lack of transparency, do you think they'll be able to handle the responsibility of these reforms that they are putting for early voting, especially for essential workers and diaspora voting? How, if they can, how would this reshape our landscape, our political landscape? And what challenges do you foresee arising? Already we know that there are challenges that they're already struggling with. Do you think they can handle this? And how would this reshape our political landscape?
Thank you. I think that on the whole, the ideas are not bad. Because INEC, if we were to look at its own perspective, for example, they are in a bind here. If they don't do those things, they will be criticized for not doing so. People would say there is no diaspora voting, there is no early voting. People vote early in many countries around the world. Why are we not doing it in Nigeria, And then it is now attempting to do that, and yet it is still not free of criticism. Not that criticism is wrong. It's important and is a legitimate part of the process. I'm all for all kinds of criticism, including unconstructive criticism. We have to have criticism in a democracy, So, but my thinking is that we may start now. It may not be perfect now, but we can improve again. As I said earlier, we can improve the process and continue, because the number of people who are unable to vote, during elections is quite significant. You have read about it. More than 1 million people are employed in elections across the country, election administration across the country. All of them usually do not vote. In a country where in the last election, 8 million people voted for the president. So 1 million, that's about 1/8 of that number, that's 12.5%. That's huge.
That's a lot.
So if these people voted, it can change how the election turns out, and it will be just as legitimate. So in my view, it is important to allow these people to vote. Secondly, diaspora voting is also important. Diasporans, and I've been there myself before, contribute a lot to Nigeria. They send a lot of money home to families, and so on, which contributes to the economy. Okay. I think they should also have a say in deciding who governs in the country. The question is, how do you do it, and how do you do it transparently? And the answer is, I think, technology. So, which is what they are saying, that, okay, we want to use, people can actually download PVCs on their own. Yes. I have voted in UK elections, and all I needed was just my email.
Wow.
And that was it. Just printed it out on my own printer at home, and then went there and vote. Again, the political culture. Most people would not want to cheat in these kinds of systems. You understand? Here, the reverse is the case.
So it's based on morals and values.
Yes, the existing social values. But I'm surprised two women interviewing, and you didn't talk about the inclusion of women.
Oh, we understand the inclusion of women in it.
Oh, we've
actually run out of time.
That's all right.
Yes.
We understand the inclusion of women and the disabled. There are other pressing issues, although that is very, very important, and we know the women will speak for it. But there are other pressing issues that need to address transparency and build trust in the electoral process that will still favor women.
There's also cynicism. Sometimes, no matter what you do, you cannot take away that cynicism. The difference between transparency and cynicism is the source.
Yeah.
If you, as a reporter, you write a story, you bring in every voice, somebody tells you something and you write it, you follow all the norms of journalism and you put out the story there, and somebody dismisses your story as fake news. How does that feel? You know, is it your fault or their fault? INEC sometimes is also here.
Yeah, all right, Doctor, we wish we could continue this conversation, but they're really on our neck to wrap up the conversation. Thank you so much for creating out time out of your busy schedule to join us on the morning show. This is home, so we look forward to always dragging you a lot more.
I agree.
Thank you for being here.
To our listeners there, we hope to our viewers, we hope you've picked something from our conversation. This morning, we'll be going on a quick break. When we get back, it'll be time for us to take a look at stories that made it to the front pages of selected dailies. Do stay tuned. We'll be right back.